My name is Gail. I'm a believer in Jesus Christ who sometimes struggles with codependency. I was raised in a nice home with loving parents, and I have 2 sisters. My sisters were outgoing, popular, and had lots of friends. I was quiet, very shy, and had just a few friends. I liked helping my dad with carpentry, went berry picking, helped him in the garden, and I would generally hang out with him wherever and whatever he was doing. My dad loved his wife and his girls, and with his words and his life, he taught me to never put up with abuse from boys or men, and I didn't, at least overt abuse. We had attended church each Sunday. I joined the choir when I was old enough and worked my way through junior college as the secretary to the minister at our church. But having a personal relationship with the Lord wasn't something I heard about. I thought I was a Christian because I wasn't Jewish or Hindu or another religion. After working for a year and a half after junior college, a girlfriend and I decided to move to San Francisco, California. My parents were a bit upset, but I was a month shy of 20, and I did have a great uncle who lived in San Francisco, and he could keep an eye on me, so they let me go. I wanted to see a little more of the world than Hibbing, Minnesota. Also, I had gotten engaged to a young man I met in college, and I really didn't want to get married. In San Francisco, I got a job right away, and after a while, I met a man that worked on the same floor as I did in a different department. He asked me out, and after a couple of months of dating, he asked me to marry him. He was 6 years older than me, the first man I had dated, and he was funny and treated me well and told me he needed me. I didn't see the pattern in my life, saying yes to getting engaged, then saying yes to getting married, not really wanting to, but not able to say no, getting stuck in a corner with no way out except to hurt someone. I didn't want to hurt anyone. I was certainly gullible, or maybe naive would be a better word. I was a people pleaser. I was the one that always tried to do the right thing, so I convinced myself and my parents that I loved him. We were married 3 months after we met. 2 years later, we had our first child. I became a stay-at-home mom. 2 years after that, we bought our first house. He commuted to San Francisco from Petaluma. He had always gone out on Friday nights, and that didn't change when we moved an hour away from his work. He commuted on the bus, and on Friday nights he would come home at 9 or 10 after spending the evening with his friends at a bar. I would pick him up at the bus stop. Then, gradually, he added a day or 2 during the week to be with his buddies at the bar. I was getting more and more unhappy, but realized I wasn't going anywhere. I felt he was really a nice man, provided for us, loved us. He just drank too much. I was becoming a very good codependent. Our second daughter was born 5 years after our first. His drinking didn't stop, but then he hardly ever drank at home. He would call me from a bar close to the bus stop in Petaluma to pick him up and want to stay there to have dinner. Dinner was usually very late. One time he had taken the car to work, and he called and told me to take the bus with the kids into San Francisco and meet him at his favorite bar. I dutifully packed up the kids. Stacy was probably 7 and Dana was 2. We spent an hour and a half on the bus, got off at the right stop, and when the bus pulled away, Stacy wasn't there. She had gotten stuck behind some people and was unable to get off. I picked up Dana and ran down the long block to the next stop. She was waiting for us. She was so scared. She is 47 now and still remembers that as a very traumatic day. Another time I remember so vividly, again, taking the bus to San Francisco with the girls, meeting him at a restaurant for dinner. As we were walking back to the car after the evening of drinking, dancing, and eating dinner, I watched my husband leaning against Stacy, keeping himself steady. I suddenly realized what an awful sight that was. She was too young to be holding up her dad. She shouldn't have to see him like that and slurring his words and stumbling. It made me cry. The last time I met him at a bar, he called me from the bus stop and asked me to come down to the bar that was close there. I told him it was late. The kids were getting ready to go to bed. He told me Stacy was old enough to watch her younger sister. He practically ordered me to meet him, and I did as I was told. But finally, my protective instincts kicked in. I told him to never put me in that kind of situation again, making me choose between them because he would lose. I wasn't going to leave them anymore. It wasn't safe. He tried to talk me out of it, but I was finally getting a backbone. About a year later, he told me he was leaving. He told me he couldn't stand the messiness. Looking back, I probably didn't put away the dishes, toys, and stuff because I knew it would irritate him. But at the time, I wasn't aware of my passive-aggressive attitude. He hoped his leaving would make me realize what I was losing. but it just made me realize what tension I was living under. After he was gone for a couple of weeks, people would stop me in the street and tell me what a beautiful smile I had. When an acquaintance asked me why I was so happy, I said, "I'm getting a divorce." My fingernails started growing, and my daily headaches went away. After a couple of years, I started dating. I went out with a few men, but none of them had all the attributes I wanted in a man. I didn't really know what I wanted in a man, but I also realized that I tried to be whatever or whoever they wanted. That was hard work to figure out. And I had 2 daughters to be concerned about, so I decided I wasn't going to get married again. I was a single mom for almost 4 years when a mutual friend introduced me to Bob. He was a widower with 3 children. He was interested in me. I didn't have to be someone I wasn't. I didn't have to pretend, play games, or apologize for everything. He would ask me how I felt about something, and I would have no idea how I felt. I didn't seem to have any opinions either. It's amazing how submissive and lacking in confidence a person can get when they're put down constantly, however gently that is done. While dating, we discovered that my ex-husband sat in front of his brother at work. We could have met 15 years before, but I guess that wasn't God's plan. Before we were married, we were talking one day, and I told him I couldn't marry him. I said I could never live up to what and who he thought I was. He was always telling me how smart I was, how pretty, and all that stuff. And I told him I see myself in the mirror every day, and I knew what I looked like, and I knew I wasn't as smart as he thought I was. I just couldn't be all that he wanted me to be. I was being realistic. He convinced me that I was who he thought I was, and something clicked in my brain. I distinctly remember a click. I was myself with him, and he loved me for who I was. It was so freeing, knowing I could always be myself. With Bob, I discovered I had ideas and opinions and feelings. I told him he created a monster, but actually he just untied the ropes that had bound me for so many years. We were married 6 months after we met, November of 1977. Our blended family was 5 children who were 6, 7, 8, 10, and 13. And we had 2 dogs and 5 cats, and we were starting a wonderful life. I loved having all those kids. We were both high energy. We loved going places, doing things with the family. Bob had a good job. We lived in a big 5-bedroom house in the Oakland Hills, and Bob didn't react to my codependency. He would tell me I didn't need to fix anything. He was capable of getting his own coffee, he ironed his own shirts, and he did the repairing. I never did tell our boys that in the real world, most moms did the ironing. They still iron their own things to this day. That is, if they iron at all. So we settled in making a home. The first problem arose when our youngest son came home unexpectedly from school late one morning. We were having a waterbed delivered and installed, and Seth walked in the door just before noon. I hadn't seen him come in. He was probably 7. The installer told me I should check on my son because he looked like he was in a trance. I found him in the hall and asked if he was sick. He said he wasn't. He didn't know why he was home and generally seemed confused. I called the school, told him he was home, and then called Bob and told him something was wrong. When he got home from work, we talked to Seth, and then we talked to each other. Bob suggested Seth go to see the psychologist who had been his late wife's therapist. The woman was actually a child psychologist as well as helping women with depression. After meeting with Seth, the counselor said he needed to come to terms with his mother's death, and that opened up counseling for the other kids as well. As time went on, our oldest son, who was then 12, was having problems in school. He was quiet, not involved in sports, and his friend down the street had a father who grew marijuana in the backyard. I always wanted things to be perfect, so I caught him doing things he shouldn't. He rebelled by doing more. I got more vigilant and looking for wrongdoing. And Matthew started smoking cigarettes, smoking dope, drinking, and other things I'm sure I really didn't want to know. He got more and more belligerent toward me. I was the wicked stepmother. When he was in 9th grade, he was arrested for being high and trying to break windows in the school along with some of his friends. They hadn't done much damage, and we left him in jail overnight, and luckily the school didn't press charges. Matthew ran away sometime after that and was gone for a week. Bob and the neighbor boy's father, that same neighbor, found them late one night in a canyon in the Oakland Hills, but that's another story. I think Bob told that in his testimony. Matthew kept acting out, spending most of his time out in the fort he had built in the backyard. He told me he hated me and he wanted me to leave. One time he said if he had had a knife, he would kill me. I told him there was nothing he could do that would make me leave. I loved his dad and all of them, and I was there for the duration. Those were brave words, but I meant them. But it was also a very difficult time for me. Then a lady who lived across the street from us invited me to a women's retreat. She had seen much of what was going on and had been praying for us. We talked about it, and I felt something important was happening. I was compelled to go. If nothing else, I would get a weekend away from the problems. I know now that God was drawing me to himself. I became a Christian that weekend in September of 1982. I had come to the end of myself. I put my trust in Jesus. That next weekend, we went to church, First Covenant in Oakland. Bob liked the pastor. He was a scholar. We kept going every Sunday. I didn't tell Bob that I had become a follower of Jesus, but he watched me. He said my attitude toward Matthew changed. I was more loving and accepting of him. One day, after a few months, Bob said something, I don't even remember what it was, but I said, "You're talking like a Christian." And he responded with, "Well, of course, how else would I talk?" That was very exciting. We both started reading the Bible and talking God stuff and scaring the kids. It was wonderful to have a spiritual partner. We were just a little zealous at first. It started an incredible adventure. Things didn't suddenly get wonderful, though, just because we were both Christians. We still had the 5 kids, and one year they were all teens at once. What a lovely year that was. Our younger girls stole a neighbor's car when they were about 14. One of them was taking care of the neighbor's house and pets while they were on vacation. The other one saw the car keys and decided things were a little too calm, so they snuck out one night, took the car, picked up a couple of friends from Montclair, then headed for Alameda Beach. They were stopped in downtown Oakland by a police officer who watched them run a red light. It was 1 o'clock in the morning. The officer was very nice and called us from the downtown area rather than from the police department. They were properly chastised, and we brought them home and nailed their feet to the floor for a little while. All the kids experimented with alcohol and or drugs, and we give God all the glory for keeping them from destroying themselves. They've all had their issues, either with losing a mother to mental illness, a father in the throes of alcoholism, or imperfect parents. But God has been faithful and has kept them safe. They are happy, productive grown-ups with families of their own. Our 14th grandchildren is on the way. Recently, I have had a hard time reconciling my growing up in a lovely family and loving family and my struggle with codependency and lack of self-esteem. Being a middle child has something to do with it. Wanting to please people, do the right thing, and being kind of a perfectionist is also a part of it. Then I remembered an incident on a vacation about a year BC, that's before Christ, with my parents, siblings, and extended family. After having a conversation with my mother in their motorhome one afternoon, one of my sisters came in the motorhome. It was like I disappeared. My mother ignored me. I went back to our camper, and Bob asked me what was wrong. I didn't know I was hurting, and Bob used his latent counseling skills to pull out of me what was going on. The incident had made me feel unimportant and small and made me want to pull into myself even more. The next year, my younger sister called and asked if we wanted to go to Montana again. I hemmed and hawed and finally said I didn't want to go. She asked why and kept bugging me until I told her what had happened the past year. I told her Bob had figured out that Mother always treated me that way. My sister thought that was baloney. She hung up the phone, repeated the conversation to her husband, and he said, "Of course. He knows that for a long time." So my sister promptly called our mother and told her what we talked about. The next evening, my mother called and said she had wrestled with that all night. At first, she didn't believe it, but came to realize that I was the most like her of the 3 daughters, and she treated me the way she treated herself. She didn't think she was important. She asked for forgiveness. I was so relieved that I hadn't done anything wrong, and I was happy to forgive her. It changed our relationship. When I first became a Christian, I thought that God had chosen me so I could lead Bob to the Lord. After all, he's someone that people look up to, and he has a presence about him. And when he commits to something, he follows through. He loves helping people, especially hurting people. And the Lord has certainly used him in a mighty way. He funneled Bob into the church, blocked every potential job. Everything Bob tried to do to make money didn't work. If you've heard his testimony, you know that after the earthquake of 1989, we lost everything. Our home in the Oakland Hills had to be sold to pay off lawsuits. We couldn't rent. We had no visible means of support. I got a temporary job with someone from the church, which led to another permanent job, but Bob was unable to get work. We had just helped plant this new church, Creekside, so he thought he'd help out. We were living with our newly married daughter and her husband, sleeping on their living room floor on a futon with 3 cats chasing each other over and around us every night. Bob's worst nightmare. No money, no job, no home, and cats everywhere. We went from millionaires to paupers in a few months. Some people we knew casually, Marion and Jerry, you may know them, invited us to live with them. We stayed with them for 5 months until we found a place to live. It was a wonderful time of healing and laughter, and I've never lost the 10 pounds I gained while we were there. Both of them are really good cooks. Anyway, Bob started working at Creekside, helping with the administration. Eventually, he was hired part-time and then full-time. God had him where he wanted him. 11 years ago, Bob started Celebrate Recovery at church. He asked me to do the worship. I wondered what I would do the second hour. I really didn't think I had many problems. I wasn't one of those people. Well, that only lasted for one meeting. The next week, I was in a women's group. God broke through the denial. Living with an alcoholic husband for 12 years is good training for codependency. I actually didn't even know I was one until our oldest daughter, who was in grad school at the time, told me to read the book, Codependent No More. In preparing her master's thesis, which was on female adult children of alcoholics, she learned a lot about ACAs and codependency. What an eye-opener the book was for me. Being a codependent means everyone else is more important than you. So you take a back seat to everything and everyone. Yes, I knew my parents loved me. Yes, I knew Bob loved me. But the old tapes that I learned during my first marriage kept repeating through my head. I'm not good enough. I'm not working hard enough. I need to do more. If I was prettier, if I was smarter, and so on and on. The Lord has healed me of a lot of my hurts, habits, and hang-ups by being in my life and working through the Holy Spirit. Yet I revert back to the old me once in a while, which just proves that I'm still living in this imperfect body and in this imperfect world. Continuing my healing journey through Celebrate Recovery shows me that God is still working in my life. The results are tangible and good. I've written a letter of amends to my ex-husband, giving him the gospel as the reason for my amends and the joy I have. My mother accepted the Lord a few months before she died in January, this last January, a month before her 91st birthday. Our oldest daughter, her husband, and 4 boys are all believers. Our other-in-law, another son-in-law, accepted Christ last year, and we're praying for all the other ones. I've been a co-leader, a leader of a codependent group, and now the leader of the multi-issue open share group. And I also lead worship. My worship team is awesome. We've been together for quite a few years, and they teach me something every week. I don't feel I have the musical skills to lead worship, but I have such competent musicians and singers around me that I'm able to do the job with their help and God's direction. The Lord is worthy of our praise and worship, and he does mighty things for his children. Through these 11 years, I've learned important things about myself, but more exciting, I've learned important things about God. I've learned that nothing is impossible with God. That's Luke 1:37. I've learned about God's unconditional love. I've learned about boundaries. You need them. I've learned that we're all flawed, but one day we'll be perfect. I've learned that I have a place in heaven for eternity. And finally, I got it in my heart as well as my head that God loves me, that I'm important to him, that he chose me to be his child, just as he chose you. He gave me joy so I can lift up others. He gave me a voice so I can sing praises to him. He gave me energy so I can be helpful to others. He gave me lots of love so I can give lots of love. That song I sang earlier, What Love Really Means, resonated with me when I first heard it. The song says, I will love you, not for what you have done or what you will become. I will give you the love that you never knew. I didn't know God's unconditional love, but I do now. The same God who put the planets into place and holds everything together knows every hair on our heads. He knew who we were before we were. He knows what we think, how we feel, what we do, and he still loves us. That's amazing love, amazing grace. Psalm 9, 1 and 2 says, I will praise you, O Lord, with all my heart. I will tell of all your wonders. I will be glad and rejoice in you. I will sing praise to your name, O Most High. And so the adventure continues. Thank you for letting me share.
Thank you. Wow, I didn't know what she was going to say. She didn't let me see it. Well, I actually looked at a little bit of it, but I didn't really know all the stuff. It was wonderful. Thank you, babe. Well, I have a couple of announcements I'd like to make. Next 3 weeks, we will meeting on Wednesdays instead of Fridays. I think you have the revised schedule, but if you don't, I want to make sure that everybody understands that. There is a little handout that we handed out to you this evening, which has that information on it. So remember now, for the next 3 Wednesdays, we'll be meeting right here at Creekside on Wednesday rather than on Friday. And the reason we're going to be doing that is because there are some events that are planned for Fridays that will be in conflict with Celebrate Recovery, so we won't be able to compete with those events, and then we're backing them up to Wednesday. Okay? Everybody understand that? All right. I'd like to close with a serenity prayer. Can you get that up on the screen there, Chris? Okay. Everybody please stand. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as a pathway to peace, taking as Jesus did this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that you will make all things right if I surrender to your will, so that I will be maybe reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with you forever in the next. Amen. Thank you very much. You may now go to your groups.